Hi, photographers. This week we're going to be talking about exposure a lot more. We'll be talking about what it means and how to use the controls on your camera to achieve the perfect exposure. Exposure is the amount of light which reaches your camera sensor. It is a critical part of how bright or dark your pictures appear. You may remember from the previous video on how your camera works, I talk about three elements that make up exposure. I show the exposure triad that shows aperture, shutter, and ISO. We're going to look at those a bit more and how they work together to create the perfect exposure. The aperture controls how much light is passing through the lens to your sensor. Aperture settings are indicated in f-stops, or f and the number. Your camera lens usually can go from something like f1.4 to f16. Remember that the smaller the number, the larger the opening, and the more light that gets in. The larger the number, the smaller the opening, and the less light gets in. Shutter speed. Shutter speed is the amount of time your camera spends taking a picture, or how long the light is on the sensor. The times are broken up into fractions of a second, and your camera usually shoots from something about 1/8,000th of a second to about 30 seconds. When you look through your viewfinder or at the back of the screen, the fractions may be listed as whole numbers. So if it says 250, then that is 1/250th of a second. Seconds are listed with a single set of quotation marks. ISO is the sensitivity of your camera. You adjust this based on the ambient light in your scene. 100 being the least sensitive for bright ambient light, and 6400 for being the most sensitive for very little ambient light. The combination of these three elements makes the perfect exposure. Your camera has a light meter built into it, and you can use it to measure the exposure. Set your camera on M for manual exposure, look through the viewfinder, or look at the live view on the screen on the back of the camera. You should see an LED light meter that looks something like this, that reacts to the light depending on where you turn your camera. It will either go towards the plus and beyond if it is overexposed, meaning there's too much light, or the minus and beyond if it is underexposed, meaning there's not enough light. The perfect exposure is when it gets to the zero. Some cameras may have a slightly different interface. Read the instructions to your camera to get an understanding of how it works. There are many places to start to get the perfect exposure: the aperture, the shutter speed, or ISO. You need to start somewhere. Usually, when I'm out shooting photographs, I get a sense of the ambient light that I'm dealing with in the scene, and then I set my ISO, the camera sensitivity, to an appropriate setting. If I'm out in the middle of the day and the sun is shining, then I set it at about 100 to 200 ISO. If it's cloudy, then I may shoot at 400 ISO. If I am indoors and I don't want to use a flash, then I might shoot at between 1000 and 1600 ISO. If I am indoors and there is very little ambient light, then I might shoot at 3200 ISO. If I'm shooting on the street at night, I'll shoot at about 25 to 3200 ISO. As I am shooting and I'm looking at the images that I'm photographing, I might have to make adjustments to the ISO, but those are good starting points. Once I have my ISO set, I can concentrate on the shutter speed. I don't want to go below 1/60th of a second without a tripod. Below that, I can't make a clear handheld photo. I'll start by setting my shutter speed to 1/250th of a second. Then I can adjust my aperture so the LED meter reading is on 0. If I need to adjust my shutter speed so the aperture will hit the meter to 0, I can. Once the meter is on 0, I can shoot my photograph. This is a little bit of a dance, and it is something that you need to get used to. It might take a little time, and you may need to shoot a lot of photos to get a really good sense of how it works. You might be asking yourself, John, why are you making us learn all this complicated stuff? All I want to do is take photographs and not have to worry about these details. Can't I just shoot on automatic? It's way easier. I totally get it, but these settings help you control your exposure in a way that the auto setting does not. Exposure controls have important characteristics of their own that I will talk about in upcoming videos. We will continue to use manual settings for the rest of the semester. It will get easier, I promise. Thanks for watching.